Hey, wrestling fans, this is Bobby Fulton, one half of the greatest wrestling tag team of all time, the Fantastics with Tommy Rodgers, and you're listening to another wrestling podcast.
It's time for another wrestling podcast.
The measuring stick just changed around here, buddy. You're looking at
the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be.
They got the answers. I change the question.
The cream of the crop.
Nobody does it better.
these are the best in the world, brother. These are the best at what they do.
When we talk about the legends of the sport, there's only two in my book.
Another wrestling podcast.
Another wrestling podcast. Now can you dig that, sucker?
Welcome, everybody, to another wrestling podcast. This is episode number 111, and I'm Jonathan Benjamin.
And I'm Steve Credo. It's going to be a fantastic show, Jonathan.
I think I know what you're doing here.
Don't hear me out. Hear me out. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to, dare I say, be legendary, because one half of the Fantastics, Bobby Fulton, is going to be joining us today. The fans have wrote us. They told us they want to hear more legends from the past. So we're bringing them to the present on another wrestling podcast today, Jonathan. So it's going to be a fantastic show. I can't wait.
I think you're encroaching on a little bit of a trademark infringement. It is going to be one of our best shows yet. Dare I say, best show ever.
I'm going to hold you to that, Jonathan, because a lot of people want nothing but the best out of this show today, and we're going to bring it to them. So if you're...
We're going to give it to them.
We're going to give it to them. If you're listening out there, the best thing you could do right now is head on over to anotherwrestlingpodcast.com, click our links, subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Player FM, TuneIn, Google Play. We are all over the universe, Jonathan. And if that's not enough for you to do, take another time out and leave us a good review on iTunes. Leave us something. We want some love from the fans out there. So, anotherwrestlingpodcast.com for anything and everything AWP.
That's right. This is episode 111. That is no happy accident, my friends. We go out each and every week to try to find the best wrestlers, the best wrestling personalities for you, the fans, and just show us some love on social media so we can keep doing this each week for you.
Today's show is brought to you by...
Did you ever dream as a kid of being a professional wrestler? Well, Platinum Fitness Professional Wrestling School is the most incredible wrestling school in the Connecticut area, led by head trainer Randy Sean Lockwood. Randy is a 15-year veteran and world-traveled athlete. He brings his passion for wrestling as well as his vast knowledge to the school, with many guest trainers to enhance your knowledge. The school has up-to-date fitness equipment in a clean and family-friendly environment. If you're looking to learn what it takes to make your dreams a reality, the Platinum Fitness Professional Wrestling School is your best choice.
The school is located on 22 Canosa Avenue, Danbury, Connecticut. The telephone number is 203-628-7757, and class times are Tuesdays and Thursdays from 7:30 to 9:30 p.m. and Saturday 11 a.m. to 1 p.m.
If you ever considered about being a professional wrestler, a manager, valet, or referee, then this is the school you want to be a part of. Tons of experienced staff, clean facilities, special trainers, seminars, and much more.
They offer many affordable payment plans. If you have any other questions, check out PlatinumFitnessCT.com.
Now, Jonathan, coming up in just a little bit, we're going to talk about wrestlers and if they can go on after the WWE. You know, after they've left or after they were let go, can they still do what they do? We're going to talk a little bit about that. So stay tuned. But first up, Jonathan, there's a lot of big news happening, and let's not beat around the bush. Let's get right into it. What were your thoughts on Brock Lesnar signing a match for UFC 200, a one-and-done deal maybe? I don't know. What are your thoughts about this? And the man is also going to be wrestling at SummerSlam.
Yeah, he's pulling some double duty here. And for those of you laughing, that's because I just said duty. I applaud you. You are my type of people. But this is monumental. Brock Lesnar in the UFC and the WWE at the same time. It seems that WWE is kind of loosening their reins on their talent. As you've seen, you get some of these guys who are in a developmental contract down in NXT that are getting to still wrestle for independence. Eric Young, Bobby Roode, these guys are still not completely signed with the WWE yet. In the past, this would have been unheard of. So kudos to WWE, kudos to UFC for letting this happen. Brock Lesnar will be taking on Mark Hunt at UFC 200. I'm very interested to see what Brock Lesnar can do, and let's hope for our sake, the wrestling fans, that he can take care of Mark Hunt. That way he can come back as the reigning, defending beast that he is into the WWE. This, to me, is a no-brainer. I'm glad that WWE did this. It seems to me that WWE is going to gain more from this than UFC.
Now,
there's not a lot of time to promote this, so that's why I'm saying WWE, I think, will kind of gain more out of this than UFC.
Yeah, a few things. They asked him in the interview. They asked Brock, "How long have you been training for this matchup?" And I think his response was, "I woke up yesterday and went for a swim." It's hilarious, but Jonathan, I got to play devil's advocate here, because if Brock goes into this match and loses badly, loses whatever. Coming back to the WWE in the land of where people lose all the time, it's not that big of a deal. I don't know. Does it tarnish his legacy? Is Mark Hunt the one who beat the one and 21-1 now? What could happen for a loss for Brock? Does it ruin him?
I don't think it ruins Brock Lesnar, but I also don't think it's going to happen. I don't know what it is. I've seen the guy. I haven't seen much of his fighting career, so I don't want to say that it's a sure thing. But Brock Lesnar is a beast. He came into the UFC, became the champion in record time. He is an amazing specimen, an amazing athlete. I think Brock Lesnar walks away with this one and then goes on to SummerSlam, a triumphant, conquering hero. Now, the only thing I am going to say is, with this, I do believe that you're going to see kind of this open the door for some UFC WWE crossover. I also believe that we will see either Conor McGregor and or Ronda Rousey within the next 5 years. You can take that to the bank. I really believe that this is going to happen.
All right, and then one last thing about this Brock UFC WWE deal. Okay, he wins at UFC. Now, let's say he has a match at SummerSlam for the championship, Jonathan. Can you literally take a guy who just legitimately beat somebody in the UFC and then have them job to Roman Reigns or whoever the champion is at that time? I'm sorry, but if Brock wins, you have to put the championship back on him just for a little bit. I'm sorry. I don't know. I feel like, you know what I mean? It's like two different worlds. He won the real world, and now coming into the, I don't want to say fake world, but you know what I mean. And then losing to like Roman Reigns or something is gonna piss more people off who already hate Roman Reigns. Are gonna just even hate him even more if he beats Brock Lesnar. I think if he comes back, Jonathan, with a win at the end of the day, he needs to be that new phenom. He needs to be that new Andre the Giant type character to where, he rarely loses. And if he loses, it's by like a DQ or something. They really need to keep him as like that new phenom for the next few years while he's under contract. That's just my opinion.
Well, and, to not use Brock if he walks away with a win as a strong, conquering hero, like I said, I think that I don't think there's any way. I know that people like to say that WWE creative is stupid and dumb and all that stuff, but even those guys can't screw this up if Brock Lesnar comes back in. There's no way that they can make him lose coming off that sort of momentum. But time will tell. We've seen weirder things. We've seen stranger things. We've seen Aldo Montoya. So let's just say that there's anything can happen in the world of wrestling, but I really don't believe that if Brock Lesnar wins at UFC that there's any way he's going to lose at SummerSlam. So also on Monday, we kind of got to see what a lot of wrestling fans have been wanting to see for a long time. And in the world of professional wrestling, it seems like it's always getting smaller and smaller. You're not getting these dream matches as much. You're not getting this talent just because WWE has so many of these guys. So to see this AJ Styles, John Cena feud start to play out is really interesting. And there was an amazing promo that happened on Monday. Steve, I know you've been dying to talk about this. So what are your thoughts on this promo?
Jonathan, it's a shame this didn't happen for WrestleMania. I'm sorry, because it's like, debate me or argue with me all you want, but John Cena and AJ Styles are probably two of the biggest icons in the last decade of wrestling. They started out, small, and now they've gone to the best of anything they could have ever done with their career. From John Cena to AJ Styles being champion of TNA to New Japan. It's the clash of the icons, you know what I mean? So for that promo, though, going back to that promo, it part of me was like, it's a shame this wasn't for a WrestleMania match. A shame. Too bad Cena couldn't have been back for that. I mean, granted, he had that little running thing at Mania, but that was just, I think, more or less him using his power just to say he was on that Mania, part of the biggest crowd or whatever. But anyway, I'm kind of hating. No, I can't say I'm hating. I'm kind of, I don't know. Every pay-per-view since Mania has been so good. I'm not even complaining about this, but it's just like, I almost feel like they're almost wasting this matchup at a B pay-per-view. And granted, I know Money in the Bank, to where I'm saying a B pay-per-view, that it's not the Rumble, it's not Survivor Series, it's not SummerSlam, and it's not Mania. I feel like they could have did something with like a tag match first of like the Club versus Cena and two guys, and then have it where Cena versus one of the guys on the Club, and then AJ faces one of Cena's guys, to where we build the showdown. Because I really hate these, the best out of 4 matches, the best out of 3, I'm like, I don't want to see them wrestle 20 times in like a 2-month span, you know what I mean? I want to build this feud up as much as we can, but going back to that promo, it was so WrestleMania-esque. It was like, I was salivating over it. I was like, man, John Cena even slipped calling them the Bullet Club, which was hilarious. But, just them arguing back and forth. Cena even made fun of himself, saying, calling out his jorts. I don't know. Going this back and forth, Jonathan, it was just, if you're not a fan and if you're not hyped over this, then I don't know what you're doing being a wrestling fan, because this is something really special, and you don't get it all the time, Jonathan. It's one of those matches that you're like, man, well, if he ever signs, maybe. And it's not like Sting signing, to where Sting literally had like 15 minutes left in his career, and then he got injured, to where AJ could still wrestle probably another 10 years, maybe. I don't know, but I'm just so happy that this is happening right now. I'm just maybe a little bit disappointed that the first match is happening at Money in the Bank. I don't know. Does it bother you that they might have too many matches right away with this feud?
You know what? I think that I'm going to say 2 things. First of all, I think that you kind of mentioned that Money in the Bank might be a B pay-per-view. I feel like that Money in the Bank has taken over Survivor Series. Survivor Series used to be one of the big 4. I don't feel that it is anymore. I think that most people would agree that Money in the Bank is a pay-per-view that most people look forward to during the year. So I think that it's starting a good push at the right time. And also, everything you're saying about how this is such a big match, I just keep flashing back to Rock and Hogan at WrestleMania. Now, I know it's not the same, but it still is.
Yeah,
if you look at these guys in the ring at the same time, Cena versus Styles, the only way that you would have ever saw this was on like a magazine back in the day, whenever they were saying, like dream match, who would win if you put AJ Styles from TNA versus the guy in WWE, which is John Cena. So we actually get to see this now. We get to see it play out. I know a lot of people have mixed emotions. Some people listening right now may not have watched TNA, and they may not realize that AJ Styles was an amazing guy who pretty much carried that company. And then, a lot of people are mad that they think that WWE is already burying TNA or AJ Styles because he was in TNA. But I say let's just let it play out for a little bit. Stick with us, fans, and I think that you're going to get some amazing matches. AJ brought pretty much the best we've seen out of Roman Reigns. So I think he's going to have an amazing match with John Cena, and I think Money in the Bank is the right place to start this. It may not be just your typical kind of one-on-one thing. We may see something happen or whatever, but I think it's building to something bigger, and that is where my interest is piqued. I think that we're going to see something very large, and it probably will happen around the time of SummerSlam. I'm just waiting for all this, like, the live SmackDown and all that stuff to kind of just start, because I don't think it's fair to say what's going to happen yet. I think that we've got a very crazy time ahead of us.
Yeah, definitely. And, it was definitely a strong promo from both of these guys. Cena was, golden on the mic. AJ Styles was golden on the mic. It just really, all I thought about watching this was just, why couldn't this have been at Mania? It was just really good. But regardless, that's some of the biggest headlines happening this week. If you like it, you hate it, you have a different opinion, hit us up at anotherwrestlingpodcast.com. Make sure you check out our Facebook, facebook.com/anotherwrestlingpodcast, or tweet us at @awrestlingpod. Leave us your thoughts, comments, tweets, anything you think that we're talking about. We want to hear from you.
All right, well, we've got a lot to talk about today, but we can't hold on any longer. Joining us right now in the studio is none other than one half of the Fantastics, Mr. Bobby Fulton. Joining us tonight from the City of Angels, he's one half of the greatest tag team of all time, the Fantastics. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Bobby Fulton. Bobby, thank you so much for coming on the show. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. And Jonathan, I'll tell you what, your check is in the mail. Your check is in the mail, and it'll be email, but you...
Well, we'll take it. We appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, man, it sounds great. Talking about the Fantastics, and I'm excited about being on your program tonight. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Now, Bobby, you're a legend in wrestling. You got your start wrestling at the age of 16. What made you?
Yes, sir.
What made you want to get in the business in the first place? Do you remember?
Well, I'll tell you what. I remember passing by a TV, and back then, I grew up in Chillicothe, Ohio. It was like an orchestra to me. It was the crowds cheering in a little TV studio, the sound of the ring making the noise it makes when guys go down. Then the commentator was saying, and now it's a collar and elbow tie-up. Then he goes into a hammerlock. And to me, it was like a symphony. And I was hooked from the first time I seen it. As a matter of fact, I just seen my little league baseball coach not long ago, and he said, I'll use you as an example because I asked you when you was 9 years old at Mary Lou Patton Park in Chillicothe what you wanted to be when you grew up. And you said, I want to be a professional wrestler. I want to travel the world. And from the time I seen it, I started setting up the rings for a promoter that had been with Al Haft, who anybody with a wrestling history knows the history of Al Haft in Ohio. And he was one of the original founding members of the National Wrestling Alliance years and years ago. As a matter of fact, he was an Ohio State wrestling coach for Ohio State, the Ohio State. So I broke in the wrestling business. But Steve, it was a lot different in the 70s when I broke in. Mm-hmm. I was breaking into a business that no one wanted you to break into. Yeah. You were an unwelcome person to come into their business. Mm-hmm. And, of course, it's a lot different from the day. But to cut myself off, It started from the first time I ever seen professional wrestling, and I grew up watching the Sheik, Bobo Brazil, Wild Bull Curry, Flying Fred Curry, guys like that. And I was hooked from the get-go.
Sure. Well, you just mentioned a few of them, but would you consider those guys some of your favorites back then, or were there anybody else?
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, what was really strange was you've heard of Wild Bull Curry, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Have you ever heard? And everybody's seen him with the big eyebrows and the big color-flowered ears. Well, not only did I see him on TV, after I broke into the business, at 16, I started wrestling him.
Oh, wow.
And then I was Flying Fred Curry's traveling opponent, meaning that when people would book him on a show, on an outlaw show back then, I was the guy that went with him that wrestled him. And as a matter of fact, eventually it got to where you can go on YouTube and see Bob Fulton versus Steve Travis from Allentown and Hamburg, the TV tapes. I used to go up and do them. As a matter of fact, my night of graduation, I was doing the WWF television and everything. So the Sheik was my favorite, of course. Wild Bull Curry, Flying Fred Curry, guys like that, Pampero, Firpo, and wrestling back then. Not everybody looked alike. I mean, the Sheik had his thing, Wild Bull Curry had his thing, Bobo. Everybody had a different thing going on when they got into the ring. Even before they got into the ring, they were already a character.
That's right. Now, once you made up your mind, you said at age 9 you already had made up your mind,
yes.
But at 16 is when you started wrestling. How did you go about looking for a trainer? I would imagine it was a little more difficult back then than it is today.
There was no trainers. There was no wrestling school. As a matter of fact, after reading books and stuff like that and talked to Les Thatcher, he had explained, I found out Tony Santos up in Boston that had a wrestling school years before that. But as I said, you were unwanted. They didn't want you in the wrestling business. And as a matter of fact, the guy I set the ring up with wouldn't even break me in. Wouldn't even let me in the dressing room. Wouldn't allow us to be in on anything. And that's just the way they protected the business back then. But what happened was, before the internet, there was wrestling newsletters being sold throughout the country in fan clubs and stuff like that. And a guy by the name of Ken Jugan, who wrestles as Zoltan, my friend, was a pen pal of his. And he explained that they were starting a wrestling company in West Virginia. I wrote him a letter and said, I'd love to be a wrestler. And he said, well, then come on. So me and a guy named Mad Dog Michaels in our first match, and I talked to guys later that was in it, and as a matter of fact, his name was Joseph Shedlock. We went out there and wrestled our first match, and it seemed like 15, but it was only 4, and the whole dressing room came out and pulled us apart. And Ken Jugan said, actually, it was one of the better matches on the card, which, of course, I'm sure you just exaggerating. But those guys thought we were going to kill each other, and perhaps we may have, because I really didn't have any training, and I don't think Joseph Shedlock had any training. So on the way down there, my dad had went to school with Ray Stevens, the crippler. A lot of professional wrestlers came from Ohio. And I told my dad on the way down, I said, Dad, if this ain't on the up and up, I'm not going to be in this. He said, son, if it's not on the up and up, it gives you more reason and longevity to stay in professional wrestling. So my dad drove me around. He was a big supporter of me, my mom and him. My mom said it was just a phase I was going through. And I'm 55, and I'm getting ready to wrestle Sunday night. I'm not out of that phase.
Now, speaking of that, traveling a little bit, you spent a lot of time traveling the roads, going from territory to territory. Did you enjoy that kind of lifestyle, or was it just kind of hectic and you just rolled with the punches?
I'll tell you what, I love that kind of lifestyle. And as a matter of fact, when I left home with very few dollars in my pocket in a dream. And there was times I slept in my car. There was times I made $5, sometimes no money. When I graduated, my dad asked me to do one thing, graduate high school, which I did, Southeastern High School in Richmondale, Ohio. I graduated, and as soon as I did, I left home. And I went to Kentucky and wrestled for an outlaw. Later it was to become independent, and independents are thriving today. But I didn't mind the lifestyle. I still have a bit of gypsy in me about staying in one place.
Sure.
It became a lifestyle, and I like the newness of new areas. And a lot of people, and I ask you, what was your favorite place? Well, every place had its good things and bad things. But if you could lump all the good together, it would be great. Every territory had its its majors and its minors.
Sure. Now, do you have maybe any funny stories from the road that you could probably tell us? Maybe one that sticks out in your mind?
Oh, I could tell you hundreds and hundreds. I'll give you one. I'll give you two real quick.
Okay.
Magnum TA. We were in Louisiana, and me and Terry Taylor, we were riding with Magnum, and Magnum was driving a Mustang GT, and Magnum was training hard. He was a machine, and I looked over there at Magnum, and Magnum said, "Yeah, I got a 56-inch chest," and I was pretty kind of barrel-chested, short but barrel-chested. I said, "Really?" I said, "Yours is 56." I said, "Mine is about 54 and a half, right?"
Yeah.
And then we're driving down the road, and all of a sudden he said, "Well, my arms are about 19." I said, "Well, that's funny. Terry says his is 17 and a half, and his looks a lot bigger than yours." And it busted Magnum. I mean, as far as just his ego shrunk driving, you know what I'm saying. But one of the, and it might not have been funny to a lot of people, but it struck me as funny because back then Magnum was very, very determined in his career, very serious. Not a lot of time for joking. I mean, he's a fun guy and a nice guy, but also at the same time, he's very serious about his craft. Now, one time, me and Bill Dundee and Tommy Rodgers was driving in Louisiana, and Louisiana was a lot of 2-lane roads. And people don't realize that, but we wrestled 9 times a week. 9 times a week in 9 different cities and drove 3,000 miles a week. So we were driving one night, and we'd stopped off in the middle of nowhere to pee, and we got in the car, and Dundee got back in the front seat. Well, we're just talking, and we drove off. Well, we got about 45 minutes down the road, or 30, just talking, and Dundee says, "Where's Tommy?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "He's not back there." I said, "You're joking," because I was driving 100 miles an hour. I'm filling around the back seat for him, filling around the back seat. Finally, I realized he ain't there. Now we don't know where we left him, in the middle of nowhere in Louisiana. So we turned around and followed the same road back, driving 100 miles an hour, 45 minutes back. And finally we seen Tommy, because back then there was no cell phones. He said that because of the moonlight, he could barely see the yellow line. And all the wrestlers carried these black bags back then, and I'm sure perhaps some still do. And so his wallet, his ID, and everything was in the car. And when I finally got to him, he just couldn't believe it, and he was tickled to death. But the funny thing, I said, "Well, what happened?" He said, "Well, what happened?" He said, "When Bill Dundee jumped in the car, he had a bottle of beer. It rolled off the car, and all of a sudden, so I guess that noise or whatever. So when Dundee got in, I pulled up a little bit, his door automatically shut. So I thought Tommy Rodgers was in the car. Long story short, but to me that was kind of funny. I mean,
Sure.
I'm 55, guys, and my humor might not be like
it's funny.
Humor, But many different times. Things happened along the way. And I mean, sometimes you think back and you go, man, I can't believe I lived through that. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And everything. So, but that was and the reason why it struck me about Magnum was funny. It was just because Magnum's seriousness and what a great guy he is. And I see him, on some of these, interviews and autograph signings and stuff, and we see him in Charlotte every year with his family, and what a super great guy. And as a matter of fact, I just talked with Terry Taylor the day before yesterday and just kind of reminiscent of some of the good old days, how that goes.
Absolutely. Now, obviously you spent a lot of time, we said, on the road, and we know that you were in pretty much every territory that was worth mentioning. You went to Calgary, you were in Memphis, you were all over. Did you have a specific territory that you enjoyed working in the most, or did they all kind of have their own ups and downs?
Well, I'll tell you what, they all, like I said, when I talk about living in a place, they all have their ups and downs. They all have their good stuff. I was in Calgary, Alberta, keep in mind, in 1980, when I would watch Dynamite Kid go out and wrestle for 30 minutes. He would do diving headbutts to the concrete floor. He would come back and he would do 1,000 Hindu squats after his 30-minute match. he was a machine. And I mean, I know you didn't ask this, but I'll just say, he's one of the greatest wrestlers that ever stepped in the ring.
Absolutely.
And I mean, for his acrobatic, his wrestling style, and I seen him and Steve Wright in a match in Calgary, Alberta, and Steve Wright was Alex Wright's father from England, and it was unbelievable to watch that match. But when you talk about Calgary, I was there and I wrestled Bret Hart. Because see, before I got my arm broken in a riot, I was always a heel. I'm 100 times better heel than I ever was a babyface. But when I broke my arm, my dimensions of my body changed, and of course the promoters seen something else in me. And you know, talking about territories, I wrestled in Memphis, got a chance to wrestle with a lot of great guys, and you know, Steve and Jonathan. Mm-hmm. Tennessee used to be the joke of the professional wrestling business. I mean, guys would say, "Oh, that Tennessee stuff," but Tennessee drew big money, and I'm talking about 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 every month, 10,000 and every Monday night in Memphis. Louisville drew. They had Jerry the King Lawler, who's still going strong today. Superstar Bill Dundee, Terry Taylor, the Fabulous One, Stan and Steve. I mean, Dirty Dutch Mantell. What a great territory to work in. One of the hardest territories, though, had to been Bill Watts, because it was like a cattle drive. And years later, looking back on it, I said, Bill Dundee was a booker when I was first there. Bill Watts had to be the master of taking guys that were basically, a lot of them, rebel-type guys in the wrestling business that didn't care for authority, and be able to push them the extra step to bring out the best in them. I don't know if you guys understand what I mean. And then, of course, with Louisiana, we went to Dallas, Texas with the Von Erichs, and that was on fire. But my first break came in San Antonio, Texas, and Luke Williams and Jonathan Boyd were the bookers there. Butch Miller was there, and that territory was unbelievably great. And as a matter of fact, I walked in there coming out of Tennessee training. See, Bill Dundee got me going to the gym. Steve Kern and guys like that taught me about training and eating right. Kerry Taylor and all these guys. And when I walked into San Antonio, I was a pretty good-looking guy, and Joe Blanchard looked at me and he said, listen, he said, when I see a man, I either see no money, little money, or big money, and that's all he said to me. Mm-hmm. I went and wrestled at the Hemisphere Arena that night in the first match, and you got to think this is 1982 or 3, and they handed me $400 cash that night, and back then, that was a lot of money.
In your career, you got to be the heel and the face. Which did you consider tougher to pull off? Was it, was one tougher than the other, or in your mind?
Yeah, baby face. And the reason why is because me and Tommy Rodgers, the Fantastics, we were considered white meat baby faces. We could go all throughout the South, and I mean, everybody liked us, except for some of the guys, because we were still in their girlfriends. And I remember the Patriot, Dale Wilkes, told me when we'd come to Columbia, the guys from University of South Carolina would come to the matches there in Columbia and not cuss us, but ran on us left and right, call us all kinds of names. But when we went up north, I'll never forget, me and Tommy had came in from Japan, and we were up in Philadelphia, and was for Joe Goodhart. And I walked into the ring, and I said, I got the microphone. I said, hey, y'all, thank you for welcoming us to the city of brotherly love. And, buddy, I'll tell you what, they booed me out of that arena. They hated white meat type baby faces up there. I mean, it's not a racial thing, and you understand. It's just you have your bruiser type baby faces or whatever. I mean, up north it was harder for a guy like me to get over, especially not to get the people like me. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. We've talked to a lot of different legends and wrestling personalities, and a lot of the older guys seem to think that the territory system is one of the reasons that wrestling was so good back then. You didn't see the same people all the time and all that. Do you think not having the territories today is hurting the wrestling business, or do you think that the territory system was good for it back then, but not so much needed today?
I think it's needed, and I think with what Vince has with the WWE I think if he has him a place in Florida, he needs to have them in different places. Wrestling is alive and well. Wrestling, we just had a show here outside of my hometown, Chillicothe, Ohio. We had 900 people in a population town of about 1,500. We had 900 people there. Mm-hmm. We walked from each end, and the people loved the matches. Do you need the territories? Because, listen, the only way, a school's okay, but you'll never learn until you get in front of a crowd. And if you can get in front of a crowd 5, 6, 7 nights a week with guys that knows their stuff, you can learn that much better, so that when you get up on the big stage, or you're at Ring of Honor, or you're at WWE or some of these other organizations, you're more prepared there. And the reason why I say this is plus. It's just like, for example, a guy, and I know Vince likes to give everybody their identities, and I don't know about how the Ring of Honor does, if there's something, but it's better when a guy picks 3 or 4 people and puts a little bit of himself in, and he feels comfortable with that role that he has. Then he's able to do it more. I'll never forget, years ago, I went to Louisiana, and Colonel Christopher George Buckley Robley III was the booker, and anybody that followed wrestling in the 70s and 80s have heard of Buck Robley. And I got to the territory, and he said, "Your name's Russ Jones." And I said, "What?" He said, "Well, Russ Jones was supposed to come." So listen here, I was only there for a short time. I never told no one my name because I didn't want to be called Russ Jones. And so on the downside, that was I didn't like that because he put that on me. But I definitely feel like they need territories to help guys learn. And I think that the staleness, and I'll give you, for example, I remember when I worked for Jerry Jarrett paid pretty good, and people stayed for long times. Well, I'd also worked for Nick Bullis in Nashville, and Nick wouldn't hardly pay at all. So there was a constant turnover of professional wrestlers. Well, later the fans told me, said, "We like Nick Bullis' wrestling better because we got to see more different wrestlers." So when you're featuring guys on national television 2 times a week, I think they wear out quicker, don't you?
Sure, yep.
And I think that's why, and I'll tell you what, if I was in charge, I would be bringing enhancement talent back. There's a need for that on television because you have to get your guys over. You don't exploit your top talent on the TV program because then it's all of a sudden you're going, "Well, I don't already seen that. Why am I going to watch a pay-per-view? Sure. What's going to make that any different?"
Exactly. Now, Bobby, you also spent the majority of your career in a tag team. Why do you think tag team wrestling was so important back then versus today, maybe?
Well, we came out of Tennessee, and as a matter of fact, you talk about the different territories. I don't know why they don't major on tag team wrestling more now, because it's like this. In a single match, there's only 2 guys in the ring. But in a tag team match, there's 4 guys, and there's so many different stories that you can tell during that particular part of that match, and the intrigue and the interest. I don't know why they don't major on the tag team matches anymore. I really don't. But back in the 80s, there was the Midnight Express, there was the Fabulous Ones, the Fantastics, the Road Warriors. My goodness, and a lot of teams that's never even mentioned that were great. Oftentimes, we'll Tully and Iron and all them, but I think there's a need for that too, because it's like going to the circus, and all of a sudden you're not having the guy come out of the cannon anymore, which is part of the show. You know what I'm saying? So I think that it's something missing, that they should major on it more, because I think the people get into it, but you see they have to push that particular type of wrestling to get it over again, because it's been something lacking for for a long time.
Well, you're, you were paired with quite a few people throughout your tag team career, and some amazing tag team partners. You mentioned Terry Taylor earlier, but were you ever paired with somebody that you just didn't mesh well with?
Well, not as far as the Fantastics, and the reason being was before that I was always a single wrestler, and as a matter of fact, what happened was for the Fantastics, they put us together in Louisiana as just a 90-day replacement team. But then the rest is history, of course. Terry Taylor was great, and we were just a little. We were put together as a tag team in Georgia for a short time as an experiment, not on our tag team, but on that territory. They were trying to do a few new things. But Tommy Rodgers, he was like magic. And I don't know if it's because him and I didn't consider ourselves as single wrestlers any longer when we became the Fantastics, but I knew he was my bread and butter, and he knew I was his bread and butter. And being short guys, 5'9", we weren't going to be featured in any main events without being in a tag team situation. You know what I mean, Steve?
Oh, exactly.
Jonathan.
Yep.
Yep. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, speaking of the Fantastics, who would you consider your greatest opponents during that time?
Well, a lot of people will say that the Midnight Express, and we wrestled them in Louisiana, we wrestled them in Tennessee, we wrestled them for Jim Crockett Promotions. Also, the Sheepherders, though, really helped establish us as guys that was willing to fight in those bloody barbed wire cage matches that was in the UWF years ago. As a matter of fact, at the first Crockett Cup, and I'm not saying it because it's me, but I've had thousands of people tell me every top tag team in the world was there at that Crockett Cup in New Orleans. And people and the fans tell me that our semifinal match with the Sheepherders stole the show of both nights. And a lot of people don't give the Sheepherders credit, and a lot of credit in a lot of ways, but they were blood and guts guys, especially the way they ended their careers, the Bushwhackers, for Vince and stuff like that. But, we wrestled John Tatum, Hollywood John Tatum, and Jack Victory. They were a great team. Eddie Gilbert and Sting. Me and Tommy Rodgers had some of Sting and Ultimate Warrior's first matches. As a matter of fact, God rest his soul, Jim Hellwick thanked Tommy Rodgers and I in his Hall of Fame speech for helping them. When they started in Tennessee. And, we wrestled Tully and Iron, and there was just so many great teams. Steve, you alluded to the fact that back then it seemed like it was big, yeah. And there was great teams. Lynn Benton and Tony Anthony, the Grapplers. Killer Brooks and different partners, and just so many different. Dr. Death, Steve Williams, Ted DiBiase. I could go on and on. And one thing about it is, like I said, we had a heavy work schedule, and I'll tell you what, we were coming back one night from the Norfolk Scope, and I'd never met Jim Barnett before in my life, but I'd heard of him because I'd been in the business for years. And this is after Crockett had sold out Turner's wrestling event, and we had wrestled that night, Paulie and Dennis Condrey and Randy Rose. And we felt in our heart that they kind of laid down. You get them you have them, try to get them to wrestle, but coming back from the match, you realize that the match wasn't what you wanted to be. But I'll never forget Jim Barnett saying that you can't have a bad match when you work as hard as you do. So you know what I mean, guys, Steve and Jonathan.
Absolutely. And, I've always wanted this, and I'm sure you get asked this question all the time. But as far as the Fantastics go, we've mentioned, you've had feuds with some amazing tag teams. Is there anybody out there today or even in the past that you wish the Fantastics would have gotten to wrestle in across the entire world of wrestling? WWE, WCW. Is there any specific teams that you wish that you guys would have had a chance to wrestle? Well,
I'm just trying to think. Some of them that we didn't. In my era, we got the chance to wrestle all the great guys that we had all the great teams. I had for about 6 years I didn't follow wrestling, but I've started following it now, and I'd love to wrestle some of the talent that's available that's out there today. They got, to me, the WWE is starting to put together some teams. And I'd like to wrestle the Usos. Me and Tommy and I wrestled Alpha and Sika, the Samoans. We wrestled the Samoan SWAT teams and that's other team. But the thing of it is, there's a lot of great teams but I can't think of any right off the top of my head. And that's terrible. Well, you know what? I love The Wolves.
Yes.
I love the Wolves wrestling. But when I seen Davey Richards, I told him, I walked up to him, I said, you remember me, you remind me of Dynamite Kid in 1980. The guy's an awesome machine. That team is good. The Wolves, there's so many other guys that I'd love to be a part of the team. And you know, one thing about Tommy and I, and not just saying this, is that we had a chance, we could wrestle any style. Flying around. I don't know if you all seen much of our stuff from Old Japan. We wrestled the British Bulldogs, of course, and people like that. And the Malenkos, that's another team. Dean and Joe Malenko. A lot of people know Dean Malenko's wrestling in the States, and they don't know Joe Malenko's. And one of my favorite matches they just took off of YouTube now is the match with Joe Malenko and a guy called Kikuchi. And that was my go-to match, and people said, well, show me what you did, and it was at the Budokan, and I know I didn't answer your question, and I apologize about that. But I think personally, if the Fantastics was brought up from the 80s to today, I think we could have a great match with anybody, any tag team out there that's going today, and we could hang with them.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Now, Bobby, with things like YouTube today and High Spots has streaming video and the WWE Network, do you ever get to go back and relive any of your past matches since they're so easily accessible today?
Yeah, they are, and as my son uses the word relevant, and we get a chance to watch the matches and we really enjoy them. And not only that, but it's also letting people see us again. Where before, if it wasn't for the WWE Network, or if it wasn't for High Spots, or if it wasn't for YouTube, those tapes would have been gone years ago. So people can look at those matches with the Midnight Express or the Sheep Herders and all these guys and watch all this. Yes, I do quite often. As a matter of fact, we just got back from the gym. I'm 55 years old. I'm going to wrestle a year or so more. I'm doing like tons of flights of steps. And I'm feeling in the best shape of my life. You know, I'm ready to go. I can go wrestle anybody today.
Obviously, I'm biased. I would assume you are as well. I think that the Fantastics are fantastic, pun intended. But
Thanks.
I think that they should be on. They should be mentioned in the conversation of greatest tag teams of all time. Where do you personally see the Fantastics on that list of greatest tag teams of all time?
Well, I'm gonna just tell you this. If you took all of our matches with all the different people that we wrestled, you wouldn't find a bad match. And I forgot to mention Al Perez and Larry Zbyszko and guys like that. We had, and it was but not just because of Tommy and I, we worked hard every night, mind you. But we wrestled against guys that could get in the ring and go also, and that matters. I know that we didn't do a lot of stuff in the WWF and, up there to make our name bigger. But, I'm going to tell you what happened. My son can tell you this. A guy came up to us. I was over there. My partner, Tommy Rodgers, has passed away and everything. But the thing of it is, a guy come up to me, and he about started crying. And he said, man, you guys were unbelievable. He said, you should be more at the top than what people put you. And this was a person that I'd never even seen before. And it's because we just didn't, I guess we didn't get that run in New York. I mean, but as far as tag teams go, everybody knows the Road Warriors are Legion of Doom. And guys like that, I think we're up there. But then again, I don't want people to say, well, you're stupid for thinking that. But the reason why I think that it was out of passion that we worked hard and we wrestled hard and we got in the ring night after night and we gave them great matches. I don't care if we were in Tokyo, Japan or in Tel Aviv, Israel. If it was not the match of the night, it was close to it. And that's how we had our matches. And I tell everybody that. We went to steal the show. You know what I'm saying? I'll let the people say where we'll be. I don't want to be arrogant. I'm very thankful. Listen, I'm going to tell you guys, I come from a small town, Chillicothe, Ohio. I had a dream at 9 years old. I got a chance to live my dream and be 55 and live to tell about it when most of the people are gone. I mean, not to bring this thing down, but most of the people I wrestle with are gone for one reason or another. And I'm still alive and have the memories of the great times and everything like that. You know, I'll tell you what, anybody listening, I want them to let you guys know. Go watch the YouTubes. Go watch the networks. Go see the stuff, and then come back in a couple of weeks and you tell us where you think we might be. Now, I know there's a lot of people on the internet that can say a lot of harsh things because they're hiding behind the keyboard. But if honesty, there was a lot of great teams. I mean, the Rock and Roll Express. But, you know, Jim Cornette, he says some of his best matches with the Midnight Express was with who?
With the Fantastics.
Definitely.
He'll tell you that in different interviews. And as a matter of fact, Stone Cold Steve Austin said we were one of his favorite tag teams when he was a kid growing up. And I mean, to me, and like I said, when Jim Hellwick, the Ultimate Warrior, took time out 2 days before his death to thank Tommy Rodgers, and at first he said Bobby Rodgers and Tommy Fulton. He said, no. It's Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rodgers. Guys, I'm going to tell you something. I was never the type of person to have a match. And this is where I think a lot of guys today, they try to have a match that entertains them or the dressing room. We tried to have matches that tore the houses down where people were standing, and you don't see that very often. But my thing is this. I like hearing other people within our industry that says, man, that was a great tag team. And guys like you that do these shows that talk to a lot of people that say that. To me, that makes me feel great. That's better than any Hall of Fame. That's better than anything, is to hear someone say, man, you guys did a great job out there, and we enjoyed your wrestling. That means so much to me.
Definitely. Now, Bobby, obviously, professional wrestling is one of the toughest sports out there. What kind of injuries have you suffered throughout your career? Can you tell us?
Well, Terry Taylor, when I talked to him the other day, he told me he had 4 or 5 neck surgeries and stuff like that. I had my nose broke a couple times. I've probably suffered more concussions than I'd care to start counting. And, of course, we're finding out now the damages with that. My shoulders have been not dislocated. I tore my rotator cuffs, and my shoulders, my fingers are pretty well messed up. My neck is shot. It's like like a beanbag chair. You know what I'm saying? But I've never had a surgery. And the reason why I've never took any cortisone shots, I know my limitations. And it's like the other day after church, my son was helping me in a restaurant, and I seen a cousin I hadn't seen in 10 years, and I could barely walk. But today we were at the gym. I did 90-some flights of steps in about 15 minutes, and we trained. Wow. So I have good days and bad days. And I'm thanking God that I never had any serious surgeries. My partner, Tommy Rodgers, at the end, and he told me this, and I'll share this with you. He was on steroids for probably 20-some years. And I'm not saying it knocking him. But he told me, he said, Bobby, I think a lot of my downfall for my health has been due to the steroids. He said, because here's the thing. I took my and of course he hits, and my hips kind of, but he had hip replacement, shoulder replacement, all these replacements and stuff like that. And he said he thought, of course it was the bumps, but it was also the steroids and stuff like that he put in his body for years. I'm not knocking Tommy. I'm going to say this. Tommy was one of the greatest partners I could ask. He was asking about partners. What a great wrestler. He doesn't get his due either. And I mean, anybody that's seen his matches and our matches, I think we complimented each other. With what I might be lacking in, he was majoring in. What he was lacking in, I was majoring in. But he was a tremendous, tremendous wrestler. But as far as injuries, on a good day, I can wrestle 30 minutes against a 20-year-old guy and leave them blown up in the dressing room, and I do it from time to time, and I get a kick out of it. I've taken pictures with them laying on the dressing room floor and me standing over them, and they can't breathe, and that's a good feeling at 55.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. Now, it was sort of announced in October of 2015 that you'd be, retiring in 2017, 40 years after your debut. Now, as your in-ring career starts to wind down, when you look back, what do you consider the best part about your career? Maybe a few highlights of what you've done for the past 40 years.
Well, one thing, I lived a dream. And for a man to be able to say I've lived and living the dream, I think I don't know how much I can add to that. But I will say this, that I got a chance to meet a lot of great people. And the common thread through us is professional wrestling. I got a chance to meet some of the greatest fans in the world. As a matter of fact, I still try to stay in touch with people. I got a chance to travel all over. I mean, we met Shimon Peres, the Prime Minister of Israel. How many people can say that they met the Prime Minister of Israel? I mean, just so many highs. And one other thing I want to add that a lot of guys don't get to add, the name Eric Embry. Me and him wrestled in the first scaffold match in Texas, and he stood on the edge of it. And I would hit him, and he would arch his body back over the edge of the scaffold to where the crowd was, not where the ring was. And every time I start talking about this, guys, I start wanting to get down low because that scaffold on top was shaking. That was a highlight for me to be a part of scaffold matches.
Wow.
And then, I mean, we were in them, and I wrestled in the Superdome in New Orleans where they had the WrestleMania. I wrestled in Texas Stadium that was there. No, they didn't have WrestleMania. Well, they did have WrestleMania, but that was a couple years ago. But last year in Texas, they had the new stadium, and that was my first WrestleMania I ever been to. And guys, I'm going to tell you something. I know a lot of people say a lot of bad things about Vince McMahon, but there's no Super Bowl football game nor World Series that can top the show at WrestleMania. From the light show, from the production, it is unbelievable. And I stood there in amazement and watched this of how we used to, just think about it. We used to go all over. They'd have a ring, chairs set up. We didn't have no Titantrons. We didn't have all this stuff. We didn't have the pyrotechnics and all the things. I remember going to the ring, guys, when there was no music played. But the music was this. As you walked out, you could start hearing them. If you were a babyface, you could hear them start cheering until the whole crowd got to see you and they'd be cheering. That was the music. And I think kind of the music's taken that away from the participation of that. And then also the heel was the same way. It'd be a chorus of boos going to the ring. And then I was there in the early 80s when the Fabulous Ones got put together. The Rock and Roll Express first got put together, and they started playing the music in the music videos. A lot of people don't realize that Memphis, Tennessee pioneered a lot of stuff in professional wrestling and get a chance to learn with some of the greatest wrestlers. But I think with professional wrestling, the best is yet to come. And I just can't wait to see what takes place with it. It's alive and well, and I am just tickled to death to get a chance to talk to you guys. I'm coming up to New York and Pennsylvania, and I'm excited about seeing the fans in June up there, guys.
Yeah, that's right.
And getting a chance to go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, that's right. That's what we were just going to say next. That you'll be appearing for our good friends at ESS Promotions on June 11th for Legends of the Ring as well as Warriors of Wrestling. Then on June 12th, you'll be appearing at Pro Wrestling World. Bobby, what's your favorite part about coming to the East Coast and meeting the fans out here?
Well, I'll tell you what. Right now, we weren't exposed a lot. Well, television we were, and with world-class television was all up in there and things. So it's very rare that I do get a chance to come up there, but I always get a chance to meet a lot of great fans and reminisce about days going by. That particular area has tremendous fans that really come out and support it. And I know with Eric and everything, it's always top notch, first class. top level, and I'm excited to get a chance to meet all the great wrestling fans up there. And I mean, my goodness, there's not only going to be me, but there's going to be a lot of other wrestlers on hand and everything. And I'm going to get a chance to reminisce with guys like Dutch Mantell, who I mentioned earlier, and some of the other guys. Sting will be there, and some of these other guys. And like I said, we had Sting and Ultimate Warrior's first match as Tommy Rodgers and I. So not only am I going to get a chance to see all the great wrestling fans, the true backbone of professional wrestling, but I'm going to get a chance to see a lot of great old friends up there. And I hope you two guys might get a chance to come by, because I'd like to meet you face to face, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, we totally appreciate that. And in this world of social media today, we want to let all the fans out there know where they can find you. Do you have website, Facebook, any of that stuff?
I have Facebook, and my son helps me do it. It's what? The Twitter is the Bobby Fulton. And then he has the public one, the Fantastic Finale. And then he has the other one that is Bobby Fulton, and it's James Hines. My real name's James Hines, and it's that. But the Fantastic Finale, and what? It ends in November 2017. My son is 17, and he's following my footsteps, and he's got me going out of this wrestling business at 2017, and I'm going to be prepared and ready. I have a lot of different business ventures that I'm getting ready to start, but I'm looking forward, because, listen, here's the deal, guys. I don't come up to that part of the country very often. It's been about 3 or 4 years since I was there the last time. I want anyone that's listening to this to tell their friends that Bobby Fulton of the Fantastics spent close to 40 years in professional wrestling. I'm coming up to their neck of the woods, and I'm looking forward to meeting each and every one of them. I know they're going to have a lot of great memorabilia that I'm going to be signing and that people can bring, and special opportunities, Eric, and all the great folks up there. But the main thing of it is I can't wait to chat with them. Maybe they can tell me and reminisce with me some of the great stuff, because, we used to wrestle in Baltimore all the time, part of WCW. Had some great matches there with the Midnight Express. As a matter of fact, we put Jim Cornette high up in a cage there many, many years ago, and everything. And we'd wrestle in Philadelphia and stuff like that, and all over that area. I got a chance years ago. Tommy and I used to go up and wrestle in New Jersey some, and Bricktown and different places and stuff. But I'm excited about this June weekend coming up. It is the 11th through the 12th, like you said. I want the people to go and make their plans now to come out and see me. Not only me, but a lot of great other wrestlers that's coming up that perhaps they don't get a chance to see too often up there. And like I said, it's a privilege to have been a part of the greatest sport in the entire world, bar none, and that is the king of sports, professional wrestling.
Well, Bobby, we want to say, thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to speak to you again in the future. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Steve, and thank you, Jonathan. God bless you guys in your future show and in the future of it and everything. I wish you nothing but good things, and I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to share a little bit about my career. And, hey, a book is in the works, so hopefully I'll have a book out later on, and the people can find out through Twitter and different things. But thanks for your time, and thanks for the opportunity. God bless you guys.
All right, once again, thanks to Bobby Fulton, the fantastic Bobby Fulton. Always a pleasure talking to each and every one of these superstars and legends. Now, Jonathan, one thing that's great about our show is that we have a topic on each show that's pretty much evergreen. Pretty much you can listen back from episode 1 all the way to 111, and you'll hear something different that's not outdated. And that's what's great about the show, I think, Jonathan. We talk about anything and everything in the world of professional wrestling. So what could possibly we be talking about this week?
Well, it's a very controversial topic, and it's something that's happening right now. We just saw sort of an exodus from WWE. WWE decided to release a lot of wrestlers due to budget constraints and all of that. And then some wrestlers actually asked for the release, such as Cody Rhodes, Adam Rose, and even prior to that, big names like CM Punk asked for their release and were granted that. Back in the day, when there were a lot of wrestling territories out there, leaving one company wasn't as big of a deal as it is today. If you want to be a professional wrestler, if you wake up in the morning, you put your gear on, your tights, you walk out the door, there's one of maybe 5 or 6 main places in the entire world that you can go to work. Sure, you can go work on independence, which is great. A lot of people make great money doing that. But we're talking huge. You're going from, on TV every week to now you find yourself and you're not in that big of a spotlight. So does that mean that is that the kiss of death? Does that mean that you're no longer going to be popular? What does that mean for these people that have left the WWE? That's something that I wanted to talk to you about, and I want to kind of know what your thoughts are. Can you come back? Will you be as popular? What happens to some of these people now that they've been released from the WWE?
One guy I just want to point out right now, which I think is a perfect example of this, would be Doc Gallows. Go back a few years when he was in the Straight Edge Society, and even go back a few more than that when he was Festus. He left pretty much where I think they pretty much exhausted his character to where they didn't really have anything left for him. Okay, so the man went back. He went to some independents. We've seen him at some local shows up in Poughkeepsie. We've seen him at a House of Hardcore show. We've seen him then from there go to New Japan Wrestling, and then he just made a bigger name for himself. And look at it, they hired him right back, and now he's on Raw. I think one of the biggest things about either being let go or asking for your release is just to maybe time to freshen things up. Now, just for his example alone, to where he left, he rebuilt his name, rebuilt his image a little bit, and came back even stronger. Maybe not everybody wants to do that. I guess some people, as they leave, they probably, maybe they just don't want to do it anymore. To where after they leave, I feel like it's a good money maker for a little bit, to where they can use that image to make a lot of money on the independents. It's just a matter of, do they have the heart to continue wrestling as much as they did when they got to the A game? You know what I mean? To where, okay, maybe you were let go, or maybe you were asked for your release. I guess it's a different story for both, to where if you asked for your release, maybe that's a time where you just want to get away, do some other things, whether it's acting or comedy, like some guys are doing, or just, hey, you're just done, you don't want to do it, and you're done with the main show, and you just kind of want to do other things right now. I think a perfect example of that too coming up right now is Cody Rhodes, to where he, asked for his release. They weren't doing anything with him that he wanted, so it was time to leave. And now, as you can see on the internet, he's made a picture with a list of things to do, people he wants to fight, places he wants to wrestle at, and he's doing like a little bucket list, if you will, but for his career, to where I think he will shine a lot brighter taking his name, coming off the main roster, going to the independents, doing these little things, making, building up his name even more, making his image even bigger. And I guarantee you in a few years, we will see the return of Cody Rhodes in the WWE down the line as a bigger and better name, and probably a main event player. I don't know. I think that's kind of the gist I'm going with. But if you agree maybe with Doc Gallows and Cody Rhodes, to where, if you're let go, you go back out there and reinvent yourself. Or if you ask for your release, you do what you want to do, and then you see what happens and see if you can be brought back. I don't know.
Well, there's been a lot of people in the past years we've seen. We spoke with Maria. Maria Kanellis is a perfect example of what to do whenever you get, released, or whenever you part ways with a company. She went on to do all sorts of things. She got degrees. She's worked for many different companies. I think that's really the way to go about this. And it's all building your brand. Most of these wrestlers have been under an umbrella, and they've only worked for this big company. And once they leave, they don't necessarily know what to do. Right away, their name's strong, so they're attending all these conventions, they're attending all these shows, and then it kind of slacks off for a little bit. But a way to kind of build interest is exactly what Cody Rhodes is doing. and he made the list. So now all these places are like, hey, it said, I want to do the streamers thing. So he obviously wants to go to Ring of Honor, which is great because Ring of Honor gets a rub from Cody Rhodes being there, and Cody Rhodes keeps his name going strong. And a lot of these people, Damien Sandow, for example, the fans absolutely love Damien Sandow. But something happened in the WWE, whether it be the writers or the fans whenever he was with Mizdow or whatever. But I remember the Miz being on a show talking about how, everybody wanted Alex Riley to break away from him. And when he did, then they didn't have anything for him. And the same for Miz. Whenever Miz finally broke free from Mizdow, or when Mizdow finally broke free from Miz, they didn't really do much with him. So Mizdow, he was a good character, but Damien Sandow himself, the actual guy, was great at those. He did the skits where he was Macho Mandow and all that stuff, which is amazing. I feel like he could have a career in movies or entertainment somehow. But that's really the most important thing, is that they're true to themselves. They've just got out of the WWE. It's time to really just be true to yourself and do whatever you want to do. I don't think we've seen the last of Sandow. There's a lot of these guys that I think need to kind of they leave the WWE, they recharge their batteries, they come back. But if we're being candid about this, we talk about guys that have left the company before and they've went to other companies like TNA right now, like Jeff Hardy or Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle's actually been with TNA longer than he ever was with WWE. He may be one of those rare cases that whenever he goes back to WWE, if that ever happens, that people really won't talk about his career in TNA versus a guy like AJ Styles, who he's only been in TNA, so that's the only thing they have to say. I hope that all makes sense, but I really think that sometimes these guys leaving the WWE is the best thing for them, because once they come back, they'll have an even more recognizable name, they'll have a bigger fan base, and at the end of the day, it'll help professional wrestling.
Yeah, I'm also another guy too. I've always been a big fan of John Morrison, and I was kind of upset that he left WWE. But we've talked to him. I've talked to him too, to where he says the door is open for him to return at any time. It's more or less that he just wants to do what he wants to do right now. Because when you add that grueling schedule of the WWE travel schedule, it takes a toll on you, and it's you don't really get a lot of vacation time, a lot of days off to yourself. So one can understand that. But look at John Morrison too, where he left, tried doing some stand-up comedy, wasn't going as great, but then look at lands a role on Lucha Underground, awesome on there. Just the way they film Lucha Underground is incredible. So his name is still out there. He's still going strong, and I think he can come back any day, and it'll be like he never skipped a beat. He's just an incredible performer, to where it's something like that, to where they can go away for a little bit, do their own thing. And if they're keeping up, with what they want to do, as in pro wrestling, I don't think coming back would be a problem. And I think any guy that's such a great performer like that should be welcomed back with open arms and used greatly after that. But Jonathan, I think one guy that comes to mind, to where he was a bigger talker than he was a walker, I guess. And don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of CM Punk, but for a guy who loved wrestling so much, I'm surprised he didn't go the route of Cody Rhodes. And when he left the WWE, I'm surprised he didn't make a list and just go to Ring of Honor, or go back to Ring of Honor, or go to New Japan, or just, I don't know, all these other places, and just do like a list like Cody Rhodes. But something happened with him in WWE, to where I think he honestly just fell out of love with wrestling, and it's a shame, because that's like his whole career, his whole life, to where he fell out of love with it, and he wanted to do UFC, but that's been coming along very slowly. It's been 2 years that CM Punk has been technically in the UFC, but has not had a match yet, and rumors are going around that he could have a match this year. We'll see what happens. But Jonathan, what do you think about the Punk situation? Because that's almost a guy who loved wrestling this much, to where almost started a revolution with his pipe bomb, to where you think he would have did more after his release, and just used his name and his fame, and to do more than just UFC. I'm surprised he didn't do more of wrestling. Do you think it was below him then, or I don't know?
Well, I think that he had got his mind set on something. He had mentioned it before that he's a really big fan. He started to kind of implement a lot of UFC maneuvers in his repertoire before he left. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. It still keeps him in the news, and any press is good press. We've learned that before. So I don't think he's done necessarily with wrestling, but this is something he wanted to do. So let him have at it, and then we'll see what happens a couple of years down the road. I think that there's a chance that he will be fighting soon as well. And so, maybe he wins and he continues and he builds himself a bigger brand than he ever had before. So I never really want to see anybody fail, but I would like to see CM Punk back in wrestling at some point, especially now with all these great names, AJ Styles, Kevin Owens, all these guys. They would have had some great matches. So I'm excited about the possibility of CM Punk. It is a little sad that he left the business, but we'll get him back, I think.
Sure, yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, if any return happens, and if it's a CM Punk return, that will definitely spark a lot of interest, because I know there's a lot of CM Punk fans. A lot of them were very upset when he left, and almost I feel like some people that I talked to that were big CM Punk fans just don't want to watch it on a regular basis because he left, and that's how much of a fan they were of his. So it'll be interesting to where it's never say never in wrestling. To if he does return, it's sure going to be interesting, especially with a lot of his friends now on the roster, from Samoa Joe, Austin Aries, a lot of dream matches. So hopefully, if his UFC run doesn't go as well, I hope he rethinks his status in life and gives the fans back something a little bit more. But I don't know. Maybe he saved a lot of money and just doesn't care anymore. Who knows? A unique character, Jonathan, Adam Rose. We've seen his stuff on that ESPN E60. We've seen him on there. We've seen his personal life stories, especially some struggles recently, some private matters he had within his home. A few months ago, he was put on suspension for a drug use charge or whatever within WWE, but then it turned out that it was legal and it was prescribed. It wasn't illegal. Then he was reinstated, and then literally, right when he was reinstated, he had this this domestic dispute problem at home, and then he was released. A guy who can't catch a break. This kind of release is unique to where it's hard to talk about, Jonathan, because at one point it was a domestic abuse case, and his wife pleaded for him not to go to jail because of their special needs child. So there's a lot of things going around in his story. So it's hard to be favorite him or be against him, because there's just so many things going on that he's dealing with personally that we'll never know. A lot of people may never know. So for him, Jonathan, what I'm reading about right now too is that he left, he got released, and now he's gonna go back on the indie scene as Aldo Rose. He's keeping the party gimmick, but I think he's gonna make it not as much PG as I think he said it was. But Jonathan, what do you think about this? Because this is a very unique case. He was put on suspension, then he was released for this kind of incident, and it was a lot of guys haven't really been released for this sort of incident. And the only other guy I could think of was Bram. Is that his name in TNA with his domestic abuse charge, I believe? But then that was dropped because he was married to Charlotte, I believe, at that time. So something happened with them. But regardless, Jonathan, what do you think about this situation to where it's almost a real life situation, and it's not more or less his character? It's not really his. It's more of a household incident release. What do you think about him going back on the indies? Do you think a lot of fans are still going to support him, or I don't know?
Well, he asked for and was granted his release, so that's the first thing. It wasn't like they got rid of him. But I assure you that had Adam Rose stuck around for a while, he was in the social outcast, nothing really going for him. So there was a chance that he was going to be released sooner rather than later. I've followed him on Twitter. I know that he's never been on the independents before, so this is kind of a first-time thing for him, and he's going to go out there and he's going to give it a shot. I don't necessarily think that he's an actor. I don't necessarily think that he is gonna go try to take up UFC or another sport. So wrestling's really what he's made his bread and butter with the past couple years, probably, and he's gonna try to continue that. So I think that fans are very quick to forget, and they're very loyal as well. And this is, from what we know, an isolated incident. None of us were there, so we can't really judge too much. We are only going by what we've read or what we've heard. So I'm not in any way, shape, or form condoning anything that he did, but I think that he's going to try to go out there and really, strike while the iron's hot. Do I think we'll see Adam Rose back in the WWE anytime soon? No, I don't think so. I think now that this has all came about, that he's going to find it harder to get back into the WWE, but as the old adage goes, we never say never.
Jonathan, one thing about him too is a lot of people loved his Leo Kruger character from NXT, and they were almost hoping that he would reform his character when he got moved to the main roster to maybe align himself with the Wyatt family and all that. Are you surprised that he's sticking with this Adam Rose character and not maybe doing the Leo Kruger gimmick?
I'm not, just because as far as merchandising and all that stuff goes, I think it's far easier to continue the Adam Rose gimmick, especially because he's coming right off of that. Like, if he was Leo Kruger, then they brought him up to the main roster as Adam Rose, and then they said, you know what, this isn't working, we're going to go back to the Leo Kruger thing, and then he asked for his release. I could say, hey, I could see why he would be Leo Kruger, but like coming fresh off of the whole Adam Rose thing, and it's a way for promoters to bring him into wrestling events and say, you know what, you can use some of my people as rosebuds or whatever.
Sure.
The whole gimmick, I think, really works and can work well, and especially on an independent level, because independent wrestling is more intimate. It's a lot more fun, and I think that Adam Rose, or Aldo Rose now, there's going to be a big change. I think we'll be definitely hearing about him and some of his antics probably before too long on the indies.
Well, that's the show. We want to thank you all for listening today.
Every week we do the show free of charge for you, the fans.
And if you're wondering how to repay us, we have just the thing.
Subscribe to us on iTunes.
Hey, and while you're there, be sure to rate us and give us a good review.
If you're looking for more information about AWP, then head on over to anotherwrestlingpodcast.com.
We are all over social media, and you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and more.
If you are an AWP superfan, you can also show your support by going over to ProWrestlingTees.com/anotherwrestlingpodcast and buying one of our official AWP shirts.
We couldn't do this show without you, so tune in next week for
Another Wrestling Podcast.